Filled with a newfound determination now that they've learned a new strong move, Maractus begins its journey back into the town just past the desert. On its way, Maractus collects a handful of orange berries to snack on and keep its strength up, learning from its strenuous journeys to and from different parts of the desert and towns it had come from. One step at a time, Maractus inches outside of the desert resort's land and enters the desert proper. It's decided that it can take this trip back slow and steady. First, it'll head towards the oasis just beyond the desert resort's border. After that, it'll turn towards the dunes, heading towards the town and climb the sandy hills. After that, it's a short trip across a mostly sandy plain it saw on its way to the desert resort from the town during its last trip. The plain may be a little bit out of the way, but it has a few trees and some grass around for some shade, a perfect spot for it to rest. While on its journey to the oasis, Maractus thinks about its new move, Shadow Punch. It thinks about how useful the move could be, either in battle or in the field. Battling against Psychic and Ghost Pokemon would be a cinch now, and then there's the ability to take out roadblocks or scare away other Pokemon in the wild. Of course, it wouldn't really do much of anything to normal or dark type Pokemon, but Maractus is sure it could be a useful move for blocking certain moves. Either way, this was a great advantage that no other Maractus may ever be able to achieve. A rare and strong Maractus is exactly what it wanted to be. Something useful so no one would ever abandon it, seeing it as a weak and pathetic Pokemon. Without realising it, Maractus had already reached the oasis. It lifts up its head to see the water glistening and a couple of Darumakas lounging about in the hot desert sun. Maractus checks around itself and notices that there aren't any Pokemon around other than itself and the Darumaka. Perhaps it's just one of those slow days. Maybe this is a time where the other Pokemon are just out doing their own thing. Shrugging its cactusy shoulders, Maractus waddles slowly towards the water at the centre of the small oasis. Once there, it looks into the water for a moment, checking to see how well it's recovered from its injuries after being let go by its trainer. It looks well. Maractus' spines have all grown back and the flower on its head still looks as pretty as ever. Satisfied, Maractus leans down, cups its hands, and takes a drink of water from the oasis. Afterwards, Maractus waddles over to a nearby tree and plants itself into the moist sand. Doing this, Maractus can feel secure while absorbing some extra nutrients from the ground. While absorbing nutrients from under the sand, Maractus begins chomping on a couple of orange berries it had collected earlier, back at the desert resort. A perfect blend of flavours. Maractus just can't get enough. Daru, Darumaka, ma, Darumaka. Mid-chomp, Maractus turns its head to see the Darumaka getting all riled up for some reason. Maractus takes a look around but doesn't see anything. Confused, Maractus asks the Darumaka what's wrong. Maka Maka, Darumaka, Darumaka Maka, Daru, Maka Daru, 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 Darumaka. The Darumaka hastily explains to Maractus that a mean Pokemon said it was coming today to permanently settle at the oasis. All the other Pokemon have left so they don't get hurt by this Pokemon. Maractus thinks to itself about how horrible it would be if a cruel Pokemon permanently took over this place. This is supposed to be a safe spot for various Pokemon to rest, relax, and seek shelter from the harsh sun and desert environment. Making up its mind, Maractus tells the Darumaka that it will stay and fight for the oasis. The Darumaka turn to each other in confusion, then back at the Maractus, and laughs heartily in its face. Angry by the lack of faith in a Maractus, especially itself, Maractus raises its voice. Maractus, Maractus. The two Darumaka stop laughing and once again look at Maractus, realising that it's being serious about fighting for the oasis. Maractus tells its plan to the two Darumaka. It's going to try talking to it, and if that doesn't work, it will have to fight. When the Pokemon arrives, the Darumaka are to hide to make it seem like they're running away. This will give the Pokemon a false sense of confidence. It explains that with its trainer, it learned all about how overconfidence can cause a Pokemon, or a trainer, to make simple mistakes, which gives the opponent an opening that normally wouldn't be possible. It then told the Darumaka that it would win with a new move that no other Maractus have learned. Once the battle has started, one of the Darumaka is supposed to bring over the scared Pokemon, who are usually at the Oasis, so they can watch Maractus take down the cruel Pokemon. Maractus explains that this might inspire the rest of them to have confidence to stand up for themselves in the future. The Darumaka nod their head in agreement. The Darumaka asks to see the special move that Maractus was talking about, but just before Maractus begins, a wild gust of wind picks up, whipping both Maractus and the Darumaka. Scared and knowing what this means, both Darumaka run off behind a nearby palm tree to hide. Maractus has been hit by Gust plenty of times, so it stands its ground and holds its right arm above its head so it can search the skies without the sand and wind getting into its eyes. Maractus notices a strange shape in the sky, blotting out the sun. It's a very strange and unique shape that Maractus knows could only be one Pokemon, Sigilyph. The Sigilyph slowly lowers itself to the ground and watches Maractus in curiosity. Without saying a word, they both stare, watching each other closely. Eventually, Maractus speaks up. Maractus, 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 Maractus. Sigilyph makes a series of mystical sounds back at Maractus. With an angry look in its eye, Sigilyph uses Gust again. This doesn't scare Maractus one bit, and Maractus is able to firmly plant itself, taking the full brunt of the Gust attack. Meanwhile, one of the Darumaka sees that Maractus is standing its ground, and tells the other Darumaka that it's going to go and fetch the others. Darumaka nods its head in agreement, and the other waddles off quickly into the distance. Confused by Maractus' involvement and determination to withstand its Gust attacks, an angry Sigilyph switches from Gust to Psywave. Maractus is able to block this by using Pin Missile. A small explosion forms in the air which gives Maractus the perfect opportunity to use its new move, but just as it's about to use Shadow Punch, Sigilyph uses Whirlwind to blow away the smoke from the explosion and to knock Maractus down. Maractus is able to quickly hop back up and immediately uses Bullet Seed. Sigilyph swiftly flies out of the way, but Maractus follows its flight path, but ultimately fails to hit it. For a few seconds, both Pokemon stop to watch each other to see what each other's next move will be. At this moment, Darumaka is returning with the Oasis Pokemon that were too scared of Sigilyph to do anything the night before. Sigilyph fires off a Psybeam, which Maractus tries to dodge, but just isn't quick enough. Maractus is knocked down and has now taken heavy damage. The Oasis Pokemon gasp in shock, but are quick to cheer Maractus on. Struggling, Maractus manages to get back up and glares angrily at Sigilyph. Finding this battle amusing, Sigilyph fires off another Psybeam. Instead of trying to dodge, Maractus uses Bullet Seed to defend, and is successful in fending off the attack. Now exhausted, Maractus pants heavily, hoping for an opening. Sigilyph begins flying around in an odd pattern to mock and taunt Maractus. Quickly, Maractus fires off a Pin Missile attack, which hits Sigilyph directly. Irritated, Sigilyph shakes off the attack and starts making strange cosmic sounds at Maractus. Maractus nods to the Darumaka, hoping they'd understand its need for another distraction, so both Darumaka get together and use Uproar, which stops Sigilyph's angry cosmic sounding rant. Sigilyph turns to Darumaka and begins using Hypnosis to defend against the power of the Uproar. Meanwhile, Maractus winds up for a Shadow Punch, one strong enough to hopefully take down that horrible Sigilyph. Maractus thrusts its fist forward and releases a large shadowy fist. The fist quickly flies through the air and hits Sigilyph directly in the back, knocking it out of the air and into the water. The Oasis Pokemon are quick to cheer for the victory, but Maractus is immediately overcome with worry. That Sigilyph, it could drown. There's got to be something Maractus can do to save it. It knows that none of the Oasis Pokemon will help to save Sigilyph, so it jumps into the Oasis itself. Maractus has no idea how deep or shallow the water is, but that didn't matter. It may have been cruel to other Pokemon, but even that Sigilyph doesn't deserve to drown for its misdeeds. Maractus swims down as fast as it can, and sees Sigilyph at the bottom. Maractus' cactus-like body makes it hard to swim down due to how buoyant it is, but it pushes itself further and further down until it's able to reach Sigilyph. Just as Maractus starts to feel too tired to continue, it just manages to scoop up Sigilyph. Maractus then relies on its buoyant body to float back to the surface. Once it returns to the surface, it drags Sigilyph out of the water and gasps for air. One of the Oasis Pokemon, a Scraggy, jumps into the water and helps Maractus and Sigilyph get back to land. Once back on land, Maractus pants hard while the other Pokemon crowd around it and Sigilyph. Scared and sad for the two Pokemon, the Oasis Pokemon look at each other, chattering amongst themselves. Maractus is too exhausted to make out what any of them are saying. Suddenly, it feels a warmth coming from beside it. Maractus turns its head to see the two Darumaka emanating its body heat to help dry off both it and Sigilyph. The Cacnea waddles over and starts poking at the Sigilyph, which finally wakes up. A couple of Sandiles scurry under the sand underneath Sigilyph and Maractus. Then they rise when under their heads, acting as a pillow. Now calm, Maractus sits up properly, allowing the Sandile to move away and return to the crowd. Maractus begins talking to the crowd, explaining to them what happened, what its plan was, and why it came to the Oasis in the first place. Each Pokemon listens tentatively, unsure of their future. The Oasis Pokemon want Maractus to stay, so it can protect them from other threats, especially if Sigilyph doesn't change its ways. But the Darumaka step out of the crowd and take Maractus' side, helping to explain that they need to stand up for themselves. They all need to get stronger in both mind and body, so that they too can survive in the harsh environment of the desert. Maractus makes one final statement, asking the Oasis Pokemon to take care of the Sigilyph. It needs to learn kindness, and now that it's been defeated and it's injured, it really does need the help of others in order to regain its strength. It's possible for today's enemy to be tomorrow's ally after all. The Oasis Pokemon look at each other, discuss amongst themselves for a short while, and then they turn back to Maractus, nodding their head in agreement. Before leaving for the dunes, Maractus calls over the two Darumaka and thanks them for their help. When leaving, Maractus looks back and waves at all the Oasis Pokemon.